2022 has been one of my favorite years for music in recent memory. Today, I'm recapping my top 10 albums of the year. Who's on the list? Check out this countdown. I'm Luke, and this is Stage 76. I've had new music from some bands I've featured on my list before, like Slipknot, Lamb of God, I Prevail, and a few others. None of those made the list though. In fact, only one band on this list has been featured on any of my other top album lists. So who else is on this one? Let's see by starting out with number 10. Number 10, Elegy by Shadow of Intent. You're going to notice that this list is quite deathcore heavy, and 2022 will go down as the year I got really into deathcore. Elegy is the first demonstration as to why. Full disclosure, I wasn't too aware of what Shadow of Intent was about until I decided to give Elegy a shot one day. And that was a fantastic decision on my part. This album really helped open my ears to the more symphonic type of deathcore. You have these epic instrumentals going through the whole album, then Ben's top tier vocals laid on top of them. Ben showcases his arsenal of screams all throughout. This isn't the constant breakdowns type of deathcore you would see from a band like Slaughter to Prevail. This is much more subdued and varied than that. Guest features from people like Phil Bozeman and Chuck Billy really accentuate what Shadow of Intent has brought to the table with this one. Highlights on this album include Of Fury, Saurian King, and This Coming Fire. This album is very interesting and different compared to a lot of similar bands in the genre, so it was a refreshing and enjoyable experience. Number 9, Dedication to Flesh by Spite. Like I said, I got really into deathcore this year. We're jumping to the other side of the spectrum on this one though, when compared to Elegy. That was playing RPGs from 10 years ago deathcore. Dedication to Flesh is kicking somebody's ass deathcore. A Spite show is a hardcore show, and Dedication to Flesh is the soundtrack to plenty of dudes aimlessly flailing their arms and legs around. This album is intensity all the way through. There are hardly any calmer moments on any track at all. It's crazy riffs and breakdowns for the entirety. My favorites on this one are Hangman, Made to Please, and the title track, which has plenty of time to really bob your head to the near percussive guitar strums. It's all done with these growling style vocals that really blend well with the instrumentation. It's honestly hard for me to really nail down as to why I like this album as much as I do, but I know it fills me with the same energy that all the hardcore kids have. Number 8, Nothing More's Spirits. I've returned to some more familiar territory compared to past album countdowns with this one. The boys in Nothing More really surprised me with this one. I'm not really sure why though. I've really liked everything I've ever heard from the band before, but I suppose I didn't let the hype develop for this one. Nothing More brings in this super modern hard rock sound that doesn't feel like the same butt rock songs I've heard hundreds of times already. There are these great groove and guitar riffs that really build this energy throughout each song. Johnny Hawkins' vocals are nothing to ignore either. That dude has a top-notch voice and he really lays it down on this album. Some of the best tracks on Spirits are Ships in the Night, Don't Look Back, and Face It. Spirits is an awesome album that I haven't really listened to enough because it just happened to come out on the same day as another amazing album, which I'll discuss later in this countdown. Number 7, Ghost, Impera. This is the only band to make it onto this countdown that has been on any of my top album lists before. It's hard for a band like Ghost to continue following up awesome albums like Melior and Prequel, and I'd say they did a damn good job on Impera. This is by far the least metal Ghost album yet, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. This entire album just sounds huge. It just makes sense though, as Ghost is primarily playing arenas these days, and each new song they put out sounds like it needs to be played in one. Hunter's Moon, Watcher in the Sky, and Griftwood are all perfect examples of the huge type of sound that Ghost has established with this album. They always have to slap in a weird one like 20s though, which is a bit polarizing and unlike the most polarizing track on their previous album. I find myself feeling more negative about this one. It doesn't take away too much from the overall experience though, as the album maintains this cohesive Ghost sound that I have come to know and love. Number 6, Paleface with Fear and Dagger. I'm going to sound like a bit of a boomer here, but I just started using TikTok this year, and Paleface was the first band I was introduced to via TikTok. I don't even remember what happened in the video, but I remember the song was Nailed to the Tooth, which immediately caught my ear, so I had to go check this whole song out. A few weeks later, the album came out, and I really found out what Paleface was all about. I had also just started getting into Spite not long before Paleface, and I think that this seemed like a natural progression. It's the super heavy beatdown style of deathcore that is pure adrenaline. But that's not everything going on with this album. It has these varying moments bringing rap into the mix with the feature from Landmarks on Dead Man's Diary. I absolutely must talk about My Grave, Lay With Me. It starts out as this basically rap song with no instrumentals playing behind it. Then the 808s kick in, then the guitar kicks in, and the vocals get more intense. Then it breaks into this instrumental interlude, into a somber singing section. Paleface has range, and they can do it in one song and an entire album. Number 5, Malicious Intent by Malevolence. Do you like Hatebreed? This is kind of like Hatebreed, but more British. But in all seriousness, I probably wouldn't have managed to pick up on the existence of this album if it weren't for a feature by one Matt Heafy on the track, Salvation. That dude has snuck his way into my top 5 for 3 years in a row now. Back on topic, Malicious Intent is an album that blurs the lines between hardcore, metal, and hard rock in the best way possible. You've got pretty in-your-face hardcore style tracks like Life Sentence, more metal type songs like On Broken Glass, and hard rock ballad type songs like Higher Place. They even have a sort of grungy feel on Above All Else. Malevolence have managed to take all these related styles that don't always blend well when done poorly and put them together perfectly. This album just fits together perfectly for somebody like me who dabbles in many different heavy music subgenres. Malevolence managed to do a lot of things well on Malicious Intent, and it'll be in my rotation for a long time. Number 4, Motionless in White, scoring The End of the World. In my top albums of 2019, I talked about how much I like Knocked Loose, and I say that their vocalist is the main reason I even gave this album a glance in the first place. The moment I heard Brian Garris's voice at the beginning of Slaughterhouse, my ears perked up and the rest of the song captivated me. I didn't know Motionless in White could do the heavy stuff like that, and I was impressed. I thought they were primarily slightly edgy hard rock, and that is what some of their stuff is, but this album is so much more than that. You have the hard rock ballad Masterpiece, which has been a major hit. They have more industrial type tracks with Meltdown and Cyberhex. Motionless in White do have a very distinct style that runs throughout all 13 tracks on this album, and it's a familiar enough sound if you've been a fan for a long time. They've never strayed too far from their roots, and that's not a bad thing in this situation. They know what they're good at, and scoring The End of the World is a demonstration of that knowledge. Number 3, Bad Omens with The Death of Peace of Mind. Bad Omens is a band I came around to when I saw them at Incarceration last year. I thought they were pretty cool, but then, I could not have anticipated the degree of respect I would have for this band with the release of The Death of Peace of Mind. They first released the title track in late 2021, and I thought it was pretty decent. Then Artificial Suicide came out and I was suddenly very interested. Psst, that song might be somewhere on my top tracks of 2022 countdown. Check that video out too. Back to the album at hand. It features a new type of sound from Bad Omens that I can only describe as the Weeknd core. I know I'm like the 5,000th person to say that, and it's because it's true. A lot of this album sounds like you took The Weeknd and made him edgier. That isn't something I ever thought would even be a thing, let alone have an immense appreciation for. This style rings true on Somebody Else and Concrete Jungle. I really find myself liking the more modern metalcore songs like a Villain and Nowhere to Go. I don't think anyone really saw this coming from Bad Omens, and they really put together a refreshing type of sound with The Death of Peace of Mind. Number 2, Within Destruction with Lotus. I had never once listened to Within Destruction before this album. It just happened to pop into my recommendations on YouTube Music one day while I was on my way to see Shadow of Intent. So I thought, what the hell? Let's check this out. That was one of my best decisions of the year. I can't say I've never heard anything like this before. I've listened to the Browning and they have a similar feel, although Within Destruction leans more into the hip-hop influence rather than the electronics. One of my friends described the song Survival as modern rave, but also hints of Mastodon. I say that's an acceptable synopsis from someone who isn't super plugged into heavy music like I am. On Lotus, Within Destruction take elements of deathcore, metalcore, rap, and electronic music and just kind of mash them together. In theory, it sounds like it shouldn't work, but it actually does. Songs like P.O.P. and Dehumanized go really hard into the deathcore side while still incorporating these other elements. Nightmare and Dying World hit different edges of the metalcore spectrum as well. I picked this album out on a whim with zero expectation, other than I thought the art looked cool. I suppose they really sold me with it. And finally, number 1, Pain Remains by Lorna Shore. I hate to sit here and parrot Loudwire and probably tons of other publications, but there is no denying that this is my top album of the year. I probably listened to it more than any other album the entire year, and it hasn't even been out for 2 months yet as of this recording. I talk so much about other albums taking many aspects and doing them well. That isn't necessarily what Pain Remains is. It's taking one type of thing, a more symphonic, blackened deathcore type of feel, and executing that one thing to near perfection. When I say this album only does one thing, that doesn't mean all the songs sound the same though. The opening track, Welcome Back, Oh Sleeping Dreamer, sounds quite similar to something that would have been on the Immortal album. Sun Eater sounded like the natural follow-up to the And I Return to Nothingness EP. Into the Earth took a far different approach from that EP by really upping the tempo and intensity. After the first 3 tracks released, a lot of people were wanting to write this band off as a one-trick pony, and then everyone got quiet when Pain Remains 1, Dancing Like Flames came out. The common consensus around this one is deathcore ballad, and I would agree with that assessment. This is the proof that Lorna Shore isn't just here to make To the Hellfire 20 more times. They are so much more than that. That entire Pain Remains trilogy is an emotional journey in itself, and I love it more every single time I listen to it. If you've listened to this album but haven't read the lyrics, I highly recommend doing so, especially for the Pain Remains trilogy. It's a deeply emotional story that's really worth looking into. Overall, this album is going to go down in history as one of, if not, the best deathcore albums to ever exist. And that's it. I've made it through 10 albums today and 25 this week. What are some albums that you thought were top tier this year? Let me know in the comments. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about my top 10 tracks of 2022. So subscribe, ding the bell so you don't miss that too. It's been a marathon this week, but we're almost done now. I'm Luke, and this is Stage 76.